The station alarms hadn't sounded yet, but Mira Kessel already knew something was wrong. The Veyth girl was screaming without making a sound. Her mouth was open. Her four throat membranes fluttered in the pattern her species used for distress calls, the kind that should have shattered glass on Kaldreth Station's lower concourse. But no sound came out. Just silence. And around her, 300 travelers, walking past like she was furniture. Mira had seen a lot of strange things in 11 years running cargo through the outer Concord territories. She had never seen an entire species look through a child like she wasn't there. "Don't," said the dockmaster beside her, gripping her arm. "Don't go near it." "Her," Mira said. "Whatever. It's a voiceless. You don't touch a voiceless." Mira looked at the girl again, 6, maybe 7 by human years, small enough that her Concord-issue transit tag hung down past her knees. Her 4 amber eyes were wide open, and tears were running down all of them, and nobody, in a concourse of 3 species and 11 governments, would look at her. That was the moment Mira decided she was going to sit down next to that girl. She didn't know yet that doing so would nearly get her executed by the Veyth Matriarchy, expose a genocide 300 years in the making, and force an entire alien civilization to answer for a war crime they'd spent a decade lying about. But 3 days earlier, none of this had begun that way at all. 3 days earlier, Mira Kessel was just trying to get paid. Her hauler, the Second Wind, sat in Kaldreth's lower berths with an empty cargo hold and a client who wouldn't answer his comms. She was down to her last 200 credits and a diet of ration bars when the docking authority flagged her for a mandatory cultural sensitivity briefing. New Concord regulation, no exceptions, or she'd lose her berth license. She sat through 40 minutes of a Veyth administrator explaining, in the flat clinical tone of someone reciting a script they didn't believe, why Kaldreth Station now hosted a voiceless housing block. The condition, the administrator said, occurs in Veyth children exposed to prolonged trauma in early development. It is untreatable. Voiceless individuals cannot process language, cannot integrate socially, and per matriarchy law are wards of the state until adulthood. At which point? At which point what? Mira asked. The administrator's throat membrane twitched, the Veyth equivalent of a wince. That is not covered in this briefing. Mira filed that away. She filed away a lot of things. It was a habit that had kept her alive on 3 different smuggling runs and 1 very bad divorce. She met the girl the next morning, by accident, in the concourse. The girl was sitting alone against a support pillar, ignored by a river of foot traffic, wearing an ID tag that just read *subject 114 *. No name. Mira sat down next to her. Not close, just near. The girl flinched like she'd been struck. "Hey," Mira said quietly, "I'm not going to hurt you. Nothing." The girl's 4 eyes fixed on her, unblinking, wary in a way that no 7-year-old should know how to be. Mira came back the next day. And the next, by the 3rd day, the girl had stopped flinching. She hadn't spoken, hadn't made any sound at all, but she'd shifted 6 inches closer each time, like a small, wary animal deciding, 1 increment at a time, that Mira wasn't a threat. It was on the 3rd day that the girl grabbed Mira's sleeve, yanked hard, and pointed, not at anything nearby, but down toward the maintenance levels beneath the concourse. Her whole body was shaking. That was when the alarms started. 3 Veyth enforcement officers came through the crowd fast, cutting a path through travelers with the kind of authority that made people flatten themselves against walls. Mira recognized the insignia, Matriarchy Internal Security, not Station Police. Off-world jurisdiction. That wasn't normal for a voiceless pickup. "Step away from the subject," the lead officer said. Mira didn't move. "She's scared. Look at her. She is property of the Matriarchy pending disposition. Step away." Property, not ward. Not patient. Property. The girl's grip on Mira's sleeve tightened until it hurt. Mira had made a lot of bad decisions in her life. Marrying a man who lied about owning his own ship, taking a cargo run through pirate-contested space to save 4 days, telling her father, at 19, exactly what she thought of his life choices. This was going to be worse than all of them combined. "No," Mira said. The officer's 4 eyes narrowed. "I beg your pardon?" I said no. She's terrified of you. I'm not handing a scared kid over to someone she's scared of. This is matriarchy jurisdiction. You have no standing. I'm a licensed independent hauler under Concord Article 9, and until you show me a warrant with her actual name on it instead of a number, I'm not moving. It wasn't even close to legally accurate. Mira was almost certain of that. But she said it with the flat, unshakable calm she used when negotiating cargo prices with people who could have her killed for a fraction of the cost of the negotiation itself. The officer's hand went to the sidearm at his hip, and that was when the girl did something nobody in that concourse had ever seen a voiceless do. She screamed. Not the silent scream from before. A real one. A sound that came from somewhere so deep and so old, it didn't sound like it belonged to a child at all. Every Veyth within 50 meters staggered, hands flying to the sides of their heads. The enforcement officers dropped to their knees, membranes convulsing. Mira, human, unaffected by whatever frequency had just brought 3 armed aliens to the floor, stood in the sudden quiet at the center of it, and understood, for the first time, that voiceless did not mean what she'd been told it meant. She got the girl out through the maintenance levels. The girl herself had pointed toward 3 minutes earlier, like she'd known, somehow, that this was coming. It wasn't until they were 3 decks down, hidden behind a coolant array, that Mira finally understood why. The girl pulled a data chip from a hidden seam in her tattered sleeve and pressed it into Mira's palm. Then she looked up, and for the first time, she spoke. 3 broken words in accented Concord trade, the first human language sounds she'd apparently ever learned. They made us. Mira's blood went cold. Made you what? The girl pointed to the chip. Then to her own throat, then made a gesture Mira had seen once before. In a black market recording of a matriarchy military bioweapons trial that had gotten the smuggler who showed it to her killed within a month. Sonic warfare. The Veyth Matriarchy hadn't just been treating a rare childhood condition. They'd been breeding it, deliberately triggering catastrophic neurological trauma in selected children to awaken a dormant biological weapon buried in Veyth genetics. A scream capable of dropping an army to its knees. Voiceless wasn't a disability. It was a chrysalis. And once a subject reached maturity and her weapon fully developed, the matriarchy didn't release her. They harvested her. Mira had smuggled a lot of dangerous cargo in her career. She had never, until this exact moment, been holding the single most dangerous piece of evidence in Concord space in the actual physical form of a traumatized 7-year-old girl. "Okay," Mira said, and her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Okay, what's your name? Your real one." The girl's throat membranes fluttered. Hesitation, then decision. "Yenna," she whispered. "They didn't make it off the station clean. Matriarchy security locked down every dock within 20 minutes. And Mira watched from a service corridor camera feed as her own ship, the Second Wind, got boarded and stripped by armed officers looking for exactly the 2 of them. "New plan," Mira muttered. And Yenna, gripping her hand now, with the fierce trust of a child who had run out of other options, didn't argue. The new plan was insane. It involved the station's garbage ejection systems, 40 minutes of crawling through, ducting barely wide enough for Mira's shoulders, and a stolen shuttle belonging to a Torvashi trade delegate who would spend the rest of the week furious and confused. It also involved a decision that would define the rest of Mira's life. Broadcasting Yenna's recording, unedited, uncut, on every open Concord frequency in a 100 light-year radius, the moment they cleared the station's jamming field. They'll kill us for this, Mira said, hands shaking on the shuttle controls, watching 3 Matriarchy cruisers spin up engines behind them. Yenna, sitting small and silent in the co-pilot's chair, reached over and put her tiny hand over Mira's on the throttle. It was the first time anyone had ever offered her comfort, not the other way around. Then let them try, Mira said, and pushed the shuttle to full burn. The recording detonated across Concord space faster than any weapon the Matriarchy possessed. 300 years of quiet, voiceless disappearances. Confirmed bioweapon trials on children as young as 4. A program so deeply buried in classified Matriarchy defense budgets that even most Veyth citizens had never heard the word harvest, used outside its intended context. The Matriarchy's ambassador to the Concord Assembly tried, for 6 brutal hours, to call the recording fabricated, doctored, human propaganda. Then Yenna, 9 years old by the time the tribunal finally convened, having spent 2 years hidden under Concord protection, walked into the assembly chamber herself and screamed once, on command, in front of the entire governing body of known space. Nobody in that chamber ever doubted the recording again. The Matriarchy's ruling council fell within the month. Not from outside force, from the inside, from millions of ordinary Veyth citizens who had spent their whole lives believing voiceless meant broken, and now knew it meant stolen. Mira never became famous the way the news networks wanted her to be. She turned down every interview except one, and even that she cut short. "Why did you sit down next to her?" the reporter asked. "Out of everyone on that station, why you?" Mira thought about the concourse. 300 people walking past a screaming child like she was furniture. "Because nobody else would," she said. "That's it. That's the whole reason." Yenna grew up on Concord soil, under Concord protection, with a name that was hers and a voice nobody ever tried to take from her again. She kept one photo on her desk for the rest of her life. A smuggler in a battered flight jacket, sitting on a concourse floor next to a silent, terrified little girl, close enough to matter. Some wars are won with weapons. That one was won by someone simply refusing to look away.